The global aligners market is projected to surpass $10 billion by 2028. But with so many horses entering the aligner race, orthodontists are finding it difficult to choose which brand to hitch their wagon to. On today's show, we're talking candidly about clear aligners with one of the leaders. Stay with us. Welcome to another episode of Ortho Thrive. I'm your host, Richie Gerzon. Joining us today is Nick Greenfield, founder and CEO of the clear aligner company Candid and a founding partner of Redesign Health, a venture platform that has launched over 30 unique healthcare companies. He's here to talk with us about the future of clear aligners. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's just start off with your journey, like what path brought you to where you are today?
It's certainly a circuitous route, I would say, to bring me into the field of orthodontics. And I think even with Candid, we've taken, quite an interesting journey in arriving where we are as a business today. I started my career in startups and have worked always in high growth tech companies. So started at a company called Zimride. We launched Lyft out of Zimride. I was one of the first 12 employees working on that business and scaling it up across the country. And
that must have been fun. Yeah, wow.
It was wild. That's really where I got the startup bug. I grew up in the DC area and didn't even know what a startup was. And I moved out to college and, lo and behold, here I am, more than a decade later working every day of my career so far in startups, which sometimes, 2 years will feel like 5 or 10. And I started Candid in 2017 with the goal of increasing access and improving affordability while driving high quality patient outcomes in the clear aligner space. And Candid started direct to consumer. And I'm sure for most of the listeners on here, there's a lot of apprehension around the direct to consumer clear aligner space because
absolutely.
Our competitors have certainly played fast and loose, I would say. And our goal was to do things the right way. So the business was co-founded by an orthodontist, Dr. Lynn Hurst. And the idea was, hey, can we have our cake and eat it too? Meaning, can we reduce the cost for the end patient, which is going to drive way more consumers? And at the end of the day, can we also drive a really high quality patient outcome through enhanced and a better version of telehealth? And we built the business up over 5 years, scaled tremendously, opened up retail over time. We had 45 locations that were open. Wow. Really at the end of 2021, raised a bunch of capital, but recognized over time, if we thought about kind of our model and long-term, what it would look like, that Candid was best served and distributed by the professional channel, which is a really exciting topic, that I'm looking forward to diving into. But if you think about just the journey that we had, direct to consumer, retail, for Candid Professional, and then going 100% all in on our Candid Professional brand.
Yes.
That's really that's the biggest and amazing news that we've released less than a month ago.
Really? It was less than a month ago. I'm sure a lot of orthodontists are happy to hear that because they are definitely, skeptical of direct to consumer when it doesn't include that professional in the process. I think that's so important. So before we dive into Candid, like when did clear aligners really become a thing? What was it like when it first started? What made you realize there's an opportunity there?
Well, clear aligners themselves have been around for many decades, and obviously with Align Technologies being one of the foremost companies in all of medical device space, let alone dental. They were highly patented and very well protected for 2 decades. And in 2017, there was this thesis, and this thesis was that everyone would come out with in the dental world, Henry Schein and Straumann and 3M, everyone would release a clear aligner, and then all of a sudden the price would go to zero and clear aligners would be everywhere and they'd be really cheap and they cost the same as braces and things would work. And it turned out
I would assume that actually, not knowing, it seems like obviously what would happen. That's an interesting point. Okay, so what happened?
And you can manufacture your own clear aligners now, right? So everyone was looking at it and how has Align grown, 5x over the last, 4 or 5 years? So how has that happened? And the reality is that everyone here knows that orthodontics is a long, it's a longitudinal patient journey. It's not just an hour procedure that you do in a chair and you're done with it, which is why orthodontists do residency programs and do enhanced training and really go through deep amounts of CE. And even your first few years in practice, you realize that there's a lot of things that need to be learned and new techniques and new devices. And clear aligners are, as a device themselves, actually relatively simple. It's a piece of plastic, thermoformed over a mold. Maybe you have some computer-aided design to help you stage things out, but it's a lot more than just that simplicity, because the treatment plan and the software components of clear aligners are so nuanced, and there's so much data that goes into it that if you just make a few little mistakes with the trays, all of a sudden you're so far off course, and it's going to take you an extra 2 or 3 years to get that patient back to where you want that patient to actually get to. And so
absolutely. I remember interviewing Philippe from Dental Monitoring. That's when I really started to understand how much data goes into the whole process, and how much better the process can be with the right data, and how much shorter the process can be with the right data. Really.
Yeah, I think Philippe has like over 1 billion photos of orthodontic, orthodontic cases, at each little stage every couple of weeks, and he's got all the data, most data of anybody in the ortho space. Yet still, every tooth movement, there's an infinite direction, infinite number of directions you can take each tooth, and so orthodontics is one of the most interesting mathematical and computational fields that's out there, because to truly get that level of precision, not only do you have to have the right treatment plan, but you also have to drive, in the case of clear aligners, patient compliance. And the patient compliance part is the thing that, as a doctor in the chair, it's really easy when you do an hour-long procedure to drive that compliance home. But with clear aligners, you have to do it over 6 months, 12 months, or 24 months. And that's where we really see things go awry.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you think doctors really were hesitant to offer aligners in the beginning? Do you think this is part of the reason, some of these obstacles that you shared?
I think aligners at the beginning didn't really work that well. I think the plastics weren't very good. The computer models weren't very good to actually move teeth. There weren't, the plethora of continuing education and different movement protocols that clear aligners have been established. So I think the initial skepticism in the early 2000s was probably warranted. But now we move forward, and you talk to orthodontists and even GP orthos who are doing hundreds and hundreds of clear aligner cases in their practices, some of whom are doing little to no wires and brackets. And I think it's a really interesting shift that we see. Today, I think the average orthodontist is doing about 30% clear aligners today in their practice, up from 20% 5 years ago, and that number could be 50% plus. So those numbers are skyrocketing.
Oh, absolutely. I have some clients that are in the 60, 70, 80% aligners, and they're rocking it because they're a single office, and it's just increased efficiency so much that it's affected the bottom line really positively, but they've kept their quality of life. It's been a recurring theme. Do you think the most doctors realize that, or are they still hesitant, or have they accepted it and it's just a matter of time for this sort of becomes the norm?
I think the acceptance of clear aligners is going to come from probably 3 different angles. Yeah. One is clear aligners can be used to treat a very large percentage of cases, but not all cases. And especially when you're a specialist who really, really understands how things work, sometimes you know too much and you're looking at the most challenging things and saying, well, this modality can't handle that most challenging thing, therefore I don't believe in it. But the second part is clear aligners, not only do they help you from a digital practice standpoint, reduce your overall workload and reduce your chair time or reduce your hours, but they actually do a great job in helping you drive a higher level of patient acceptance, because patients, especially millennial, Gen Z, busy professionals or parents who are really busy with their kids, clear aligners actually open up orthodontic treatment to a whole untreated population, because they allow you to grab a different subset that can't come in for more visits. So I think what a lot of doctors are seeing.
That's an interesting perception. Yeah, I see. So you think it's a whole group of people that normally would have never had treatment that we now can promote our products and services too.
And I think that's right. And I think the last is the aesthetic benefit, which is clear aligners. They do give you control when you know how to use them really well. You can actually drive a higher level of precision. Whether, if you want to start a case with braces and move to clear aligners at the end, you can do that. But I think a lot of doctors are seeing that actually, because of the combination of the aesthetic appeal and the precision that a clear aligner can give you, that you look at those three benefits. Really where Candid is focused is in that middle, is driving more case acceptance, figuring out, okay, if today you offer a Porsche and maybe an Audi RS8 in your practice, our goal with Candid is, okay, how do you start offering a Volkswagen Jetta, which is a mass market solution, which is really what Smile Direct Club, even though I think we all feel very similar about the clinical and what they've done, they have shown that there is a mass market for a lower cost, more accessible solution. And I think orthodontists are on the verge of figuring out that they can offer clear aligners in their practices, offer those clear aligners maybe at a significant premium to where SDC is, but be able to have this kind of Volkswagen Jetta, Audi, Porsche approach where you have three car brands, and depending on the need of that patient, you can drive higher levels of patient acceptance, profitability, and revenue by having multiple streams. And so from an ortho perspective, we think that Candid Pro is a great solution, again, at that Volkswagen Jetta, where, hey, how do I get mom is coming in with her son is going in braces, he's going to be in there for 2 years, she wants to straighten her teeth, but she's not going to be as compliant, she's not going to want to come in. So how do you actually give her a telehealth driven solution? And that's where we want to play.
That makes sense. So we talked a little bit about direct to consumer. How do you think that's affected the market over the last few years in general? What permanent changes have there been? What lessons have been learned, et cetera?
I think it's changed the market forever. I think for orthodontists, it's changed the market positively. I think overall a net positive. If you think about the national brand awareness of clear aligners and the opportunity to straighten your teeth with clear aligners, I think that there are far more people that know about and think about it today than they did 5 years ago. I mean, you talk about hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of advertising, maybe over $1 billion in advertising that Smile Direct and then, Candid, orders of magnitude less, but invested in direct to consumer marketing to create awareness of the category.
Absolutely. And that's hugely important. I mean, I think everyone is aware of clear aligners. Like I've talked to family members and some of my friends, and they have clear aligners. I didn't even realize it. And there's, oh yeah, by the way, and it's totally become ubiquitous. Yeah.
Yeah, ubiquitous for sure. And then you look at Invisalign. Well, they had to step their game up. So then they started sponsoring the NFL, right? So they went really doing direct consumer marketing, which again benefits doctors, especially the top 1%, platinum and diamond providers who are getting the benefits from, for example, the doctor locator and the awareness of Invisalign. So you have SDC and Invisalign. I think what it also has done is create awareness around segmentation in the market. So again, back to the price point, it shows that the demand for clear aligners is far deeper than we first understood it. When we first thought about it, okay, in the office, there's 2.5 million case starts a year, 3 million case starts a year, 75% of those are teens. But you have this massive population of relapse and untreated adults that today isn't getting treatment. And they were made aware that, oh, there are possibilities out there. And somewhere along that price curve, they're willing to actually take and accept treatment and go into it. And that's, again, where we think we can play really well, having pivoted to 100% in the professional channel. We want to help doctors figure out how to capture those cases where they could consider SDC or they could consider coming to your practice, as long as the price point is low enough for them that they'll drive acceptance and it's incremental and doesn't hurt your brand as a doctor, because you still need to maintain that kind of high level price point for your core products.
So you really do feel like it's a good fit. You can offer those different levels of service. Have you considered seniors? I've had a few of my clients really talk about getting a lot of seniors as patients, and we weren't even targeting them in our advertising, but more and more of them are coming in and getting treatment. I think that's a really interesting change.
I think the Instagram generation and Instagram and Facebook kind of world, and even TV advertising is bleeding into the senior populations. When your kids come in and show their parents their clear aligners or their grandparents clear aligners, that they're just as interested, right? And if you think about disposable income, the baby boomer generation certainly has more disposable income than my generation does, having been through two major recessions as millennials, right? And going
Yeah,
through that.
seriously.
It's certainly an astute point that if you can figure out, how to target that, that baby boomer generation that's looking for that kind of that final tune-up where they're interested in Botox, they're obviously interested in straightening their teeth, physical fitness, nutrition, disposable income, all those things really, really lock in well.
So, what do you think some reasons doctors should, what are some other reasons doctors should offer clear aligners in your opinion, besides this kind of piece of the market that they could get?
I think there are significant health benefits overall to a patient, orthodontics as a whole. And I think clear aligners allow for that in an even better way. If you look at kind of some of the studies that have come out recently around the impact to gingival health, the impact to reducing bruxism, and other components where obviously orthodontics has a connotation of being aesthetic, but I think most orthodontists would say actually there's a lot of functional health-driven solution to what we're providing. And I think clear aligners allow you to do that in a way that truly benefits the patient and again plays on the long-term trends of where the world is going. I think the second is moving to a digital first practice. Clear aligners are able to run digitally. With Candid, we provide something called the Candid app. It's a #1 rated app in telehealth for dentistry, 4.9 out of 5 stars. It's been called the Tesla for orthodontics, which I appreciate.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's awesome. The comparison.
So the dental monitoring team, which has done some incredible work with launching the dental monitoring app and the scan box, we've really piggybacked on that technology in a really great partnership and added some bells and whistles that sit on top of it to use the Candid app, which allows patients to take scans at home every 2 weeks. And what we see with our doctors is that patients are actually coming in, again, the doctor's choice, every 3 to 6 months. And if you think about the reduction in chair time and the overall impact on profitability, you combine intraoral scans with the Candid app and clear aligners from home, whereas a doctor, you can monitor that patient all the way through and get these notifications and see what's going on. You can dramatically reduce your office time, and especially with staff shortages as they are today. And if you have patients who are coming in from far away, not only does that reduce your chair time, reduce your overall cost, increase quality of life, it also allows you to offer patients who maybe couldn't come in on your schedule normally if you don't have Saturday hours or you don't have extended nighttime hours, that are working, they're working 9 to 5s, or they have kids that are really in busy schedules. All of a sudden it opens them up again to drive higher levels of case acceptance. So I'm a big proponent, again, all the way across the board of all things digital, whether it's an intraoral scanner, the Candid app, using dental monitoring in your practice for your existing practice patients, whatever you're doing in there. I think the more digital you move, even though in the short term, potentially the CapEx might be a little higher, the COGS may appear a little bit higher, the overall impact on bottom line and then long-term on top line with case acceptance growth is tremendous and far outweighs the cons.
And one of the things that stuck out to me as a marketer when you were talking was that you're saying basically we can appeal and we could promote the practice to a larger geographical area. Like I'm literally thinking of Facebook ad where you set the radius, or Google ad. So you're saying if you're a remote practice, for instance, and their population isn't super dense, you could just push that radius out and more people could learn about your practice because there's less visits. So they'd be willing to maybe make that 45-minute hour drive to your office, knowing they don't have to keep coming back all the time, right?
One of the advantages we had being a brand that started in direct to consumer is we had to do all that. So we had to drive all of our own patients. We didn't get referrals from dentists when Candid was direct to consumer. So every patient that came to Candid had to find out about it either through another patient or through some form of advertising. And the benefits that we saw of just one visit or just 2 visits, that's a huge value proposition for a busy professional who doesn't want to have to go back and forth to the doctor all the time. You're talking about potentially dozens of hours saved, which for many people is, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in savings, and the savings to the doctor. So if you can reduce that amount of time the patient has to come in, you're going to end up actually creating an incredible value proposition. And as you said, increase that radius. In cities, for example, like Atlanta, we would have people driving 2 hours, right? Even from Alabama to come across to the Candid studio. So I think it just totally changes the dynamic you have as a practice when you go 100% digital.
Yeah, I think for a doctor hearing that 2 hours sounds almost unbelievable, but you have the data, you've seen it happen. I mean, that's really good to know. So if a doctor wanted to convert their practice to Candid, what kind of life changes are they going to experience when this happens?
You know, what we've seen with doctors is obviously reduced chair time, which means reduced need from a staffing standpoint. So more profitability, the ability to, as an example, 1 week out of the month, you don't need to be in the office. You can travel, right? So you can go and let's say you have a home in Florida and you're in New York, you can take advantage of that and you can actually do all of your cases and view them and see how patients are tracking remotely if you go 100% digital. So there's benefits of that nature. So it's time savings, it's higher levels of profitability, it's higher levels of predictability. And the other thing that I actually really like, and ultimately we've seen, especially some doctors and dental monitoring, I think has shown some similar data, is that we drive higher levels of compliance through the Candid app. And what that means is higher levels of predictability, which means cases are more likely to track. So cases end up actually being sometimes significantly shorter in length. You get better results, faster time, happier patients, right? Which means more referrals. So all these things just continue and compound on top of each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what do you think a doctor should do when they're considering aligner brands? What are the factors that they should consider when they're deciding on what one to use?
And yeah, obviously I can toot my own horn here, but I'll give, I hope, what will be a pretty actually neutral perspective on the space. So you obviously have the brand name Invisalign, which consumers know, right? 80 to 90% of consumers from an aided awareness standpoint have heard of Invisalign. So you say, you know, which of these clear aligner brands do you know? They'll pick Invisalign. The next one down is Smile Direct Club, and the next one down is Candid. So in terms of brands that people know about, they certainly know that, right? And that's hand raisers coming in and saying, I want this product. What I have seen generally in the market is most clear aligner companies have come out and they've tried to copy what Invisalign has done. So there's a lot of options out there, but if you look at the major manufacturers, most of the feature sets, most of the plastics, almost everything is comparable, and there's some competition on lab fee. So, you know, you might buy a scanner from someone and get a lower lab fee. You might, you know, say, oh, I'm going to buy these, and they'll give you a deal on, you know, a combo deal. And these are the big, you know, the big guys you know about and would be buying from in your practice. Our vision with Candid was to create a new category. We said, we want to start digital first, digital only. It only works in the digital ecosystem. And how do we launch a new car, right? So rather than having, you know, a brand name, you know, like brand name Viagra and then Hims and Hers and Roman, right? Our goal is to, how do you create a completely different modality and a completely different treatment solution? So I think as a doctor, there's really only 2 or 3 options that are fully comprehensive in nature for full orthodontics and really removing wires and brackets from your space. And then you have to say, how do I drive incremental case acceptance and case growth? And that's where I think a solution like what we have comes into play.
Okay. So you're mentioning that really if it's digital, there's a very kind of specific market that aligners work for. What kind of cases are aligners good for? What kind of cases are they really not? It's not a good fit.
Look, any case that's going to need, you know, like a class 3, you know, surgical case where you're going to have to do some crazy things, right? You're going to need to start those cases in a different modality. If you need to do, you know, significant amounts of extrusion, for example, like, you know, many millimeters of extrusion, even if you have whatever clear aligner solution you're using, they might tell you it's going to work and show you a treatment plan digitally that looks like it's going to work. You're going to need auxiliaries to do those things. So there are different types of cases that on the fringe, I will call it, on the cases that come into your practice, 80-90% of those hopefully are going to be candidates for a high quality clear aligner solution that makes sense. And there might be 20%, especially on those fringes, where you're going to really need to have some more true hands-on involvement. But I think there are some doctors who would tell you today they're doing 100% clear aligners, and there are some doctors who would go out and tell you They're doing 100% clear aligners, and not only that, they're doing it, without auxiliaries or really minimally using, elastics and other components as well. So again, very much depends on who the doctor is and your comfort level. And the thing with ortho is it's going to take us, 2 or 3 years of seeing a bunch of cases to progress to decide how comfortable you are as a doctor. But I think that with clear aligners, the sky is the limit. I think there's incredible innovation that's happening in the space. And ultimately, it's a combination of art and science. And that, that art is how do you get the patient to wear their aligners? And that's where I think in-home digital technology is the way to make that happen. Whether you have patients in braces that you're putting in dental monitoring with their braces monitoring product, the Candid app for patients in clear aligners, or anything in between, I would say that that's how you're going to get more predictable results, is actually getting patients to be compliant, especially with aligners. Yeah.
It's pretty clear why aligners are so attractive. I mean, there's so many obvious benefits of using them. If a doctor is using Candid, what would you say to them? What is from the consumer looking at that doctor, why should they choose the Candid doctor, in your opinion?
Look, I think consumers care about accessibility, they care about affordability, and they care about quality. But what we've learned over the last 5 years, which is a bit controversial, is that they care a whole lot more about accessibility and affordability than they care about quality until they're in treatment. And what that means is that as a doctor, you've got to have an offering that is accessible, that is headline affordable. Monthly installment payments, as most doctors know, is a good way, especially in the cash pay kind of healthcare ecosystem, to figure it out. And the product has to work and deliver the expectations that were set for the patient. And so again, that's why it's our recommendation, especially for orthodontists who have a ton of experience in moving teeth. You've got to be able to segment and understand what that market looks like. If today your case acceptance rate is 50%, we think that number can be 80% or 90% if you offer the different options and the different levels of pricing that meet the consumer need. And there's nowhere, again, clinical judgment notwithstanding, the marketing that Smile Direct Club has done to anchor consumers on what they think the price is and could and should be. I think that that's really important to keep in mind, to understand there is a competitor out there, mass marketing tens of millions of dollars a quarter, saying that things cost less than $100 a month. And so consumers are getting that in their head. And so when you put on that patient versus customer mindset, understanding what those patients who are sitting in your chair are seeing out there, accessibility and affordability, and using technology to make that work is really the key.
Tell me more about accessibility. What are the things that make it more accessible?
Accessibility is a word that I love, because I think it shows, obviously, it applies to income, it applies to geography, it applies to it applies in many ways to perception of affordability, whether it's a lower upfront fee or the same upfront fee. But accessibility may mean fewer visits to the office, which means less gas, which means missing less work, right? It's those types of components that we put in there. Accessibility means if you're located in suburban Houston and you have somebody who's willing to drive 2 hours because you offer a service that requires 3 visits, and the guy an hour from their house requires 15 visits, right? That's a way to win from a competitive standpoint. So I think accessibility can be a huge differentiator for doctors.
So yeah, it sounds like it's less disruption in someone's life, whether it's their existing budget, the time that they have, whatever. That makes sense.
We're all fighting Netflix, right? The American is watching more Netflix and Amazon Prime Video. They're watching 4, 5, 6 hours a day. They're watching their TV. And at the end of the day, someone's got to get off their couch and be willing to actually go and make this life improvement. And they've got to make that choice. And so for kids, their parents are making that choice for them. But for the adult market, that is who we are fighting. We're fighting latency. 75% of people have some type of malocclusion that could benefit from orthodontic therapy. And clear aligners are, I believe, the best way to do that, especially for the long tail where there's a want and a need to some extent. Well, is it a matter of survival? Maybe not. But we've got to figure out how to get them off their chair. And so accessibility is the best way to do that, because if they only have to do 3 office visits, it just means they can watch a lot more Netflix.
That's an interesting way to put it. All right. So accessibility, affordability. So what are the benefits of Candid versus other aligner brands besides these two factors?
Well, I think that those two headline factors are really important. But I think
Yeah,
if you look at the
absolutely.
clinical, if you look at the clinical, really that's the kind of the mode and mentality that we like to come from, which is what is this product and why does it work? So Candid uses, from a prescription standpoint, an expansive oriented philosophy around orthodontics, which means rather than using retractive, we're really trying to help expand the arches and create space in the mouth. And that in many ways comes from our partnership in the airway space with partners like Vivos, who are really thinking about how do you create a healthy, symmetrical palate? How do you think about expanding the airway to address health directly? So Candid's philosophies really are geared around expansion. The second is precision. Our clear aligner, it loses less from intraoral scan to manufacturing than any other clear aligner that's out there today. We do a tremendous amount of data maintenance, and that precision leads to more predictable outcomes. And the last is compliance, which is the Candid app drives 90% plus patient compliance through treatment, which means that if you come up with a treatment plan and it's the greatest treatment plan, that's ever been created, but your patient is only wearing their aligner 16 hours a day, you're going to have to do 3 sets of refinements. And our goal is to minimize the number of refinements needed and improve predictability. And we believe that comes through great treatment planning, obviously expansive for us, expansive oriented orthodontics. And lastly, that partnership with the patient around compliance. So these are the clinical benefits that we can provide. From a material standpoint, we use a tri-layer material that I'm actually wearing the aligners right now. It's incredibly comfortable. The movement and the force movements are very predictable. So instead of having 24 to 48 hours of movement can last for up to 7 days. We suggest a 2-week wear schedule to really make sure that patient is truly getting the movement and then the inflammation and then the healing and then moving on to that next stage. So these are all the things that we do differently at Candid versus the competitors. And we hope that at the very least, if you're thinking about expanding orthodontics in your practice, expanding your clear aligner offerings, that you would consider Candid as a potential, as I said, Volkswagen Jetta to potentially the Porsche you have with some of the other players that are out there today.
Very well put. So I assume the app works with the scan box, like it's a software and hardware relationship. Can you kind of explain to us, take us through the steps of using the scan box? What is it like?
Yeah, it's really simple for the patient. They'll every 2 weeks they'll get an automated push notification prompt. That push notification will tell them to take a scan of their teeth. So they'll open the Candid app. They'll put the Candid app inside of this piece of hardware. It's really just a piece of plastic that has a cheek retractor and allows the phone to actually see directly in their mouth. The patient will then quote unquote scan their teeth, which is a burst of video and still images of the teeth with aligners in, with aligners out, with teeth touching, with mouth open, and then also occlusal photos. That information will then all go into dental monitoring's API and really powered through some amazing technology they've created. Again, over 1 billion photos that they've processed. And it'll process all the information and determine if their teeth are tracking based on the STL files that were initially created. So it's all done using computer vision and AI. And just 12 hours later, a patient will get notified using this AI technology whether their teeth are tracking and whether they're ready to move on to the next stage. And as an orthodontist, you always have the ability to go into the Candid monitoring back end and go check out and see how your patients are moving. But you can also set it up so the AI automatically tells your patients to move on to the next stage. And we have a bunch of really interesting workflows.
Really? That's interesting. You can automatically set that. How many
exactly.
doctors, what do you have idea percentage that have decided to put that setting in or not? Because that's a kind of a huge step if you're into control.
So I would say 99% of our doctors, once they get going, I like that automated setup because really it's a visual check. But what we do is after you go through what we call no-goes, which means the aligners aren't seated right, they're not fitting well, you're not tracking the way you should be, we'll give you kind of warnings at 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. It automatically, once you pass a certain threshold, gets escalated to the doctor. So if the patient isn't tracking, the doctor will know it, but rather than bothering the doctor every 2 weeks, that's what the AI is for, right? That's why So computer vision is incredible technology. This way, the doctor will really get escalated when there's a patient who isn't tracking, and that way the doctor can actually intervene. So it's the perfect blend, really, of one of the most amazing use cases for interventional medicine that's out there today. And orthodontics is sometimes on the cutting edge compared to every other field in healthcare, with 3D printing and now with interventional.
Oh, I totally agree. If I've learned anything from doing this podcast, is that I did not realize how advanced orthodontics is. It's incredibly advanced. I mean, I wish most of healthcare was as advanced and innovative as orthodontics is.
Yeah, it's cash. It turns out that cash pay healthcare has to put forward innovation, because the barrier is a lot higher, right?
That makes sense. I see. What interesting.
Yeah,
that's an interesting idea of the reason behind it. All right. So is Candid good for teens or kids? How?
Full adult dentition. So Candid is not today treating anyone until there's full adult dentition, and then as long as that's the case, then a provider can submit cases with Candid.
Gotcha. Are they recyclable? I assume they're not, because no one's are, but just wondering if they're going to be, or what the status is of that. People ask me
every time I get that ESG questionnaire from my investors, I cringe, because I want our product to be recyclable, and we're working on 3D printing, on making the resins reusable. But today, unfortunately, the plastic is not recyclable.
Yeah, no one's achieved that yet. So I think one day material science will get there for sure. Do you guys give doctors marketing resources to help promote it when they sign up with you? What kind of support is there for that?
I think that's one of the best parts about Candid. We take in our business that was 100% DTC with some of the best marketers in the world. Talking about folks who spent billions of dollars on advertising over the last 20 years, who work at Candid and who really understand that space incredibly well, and said, hey, how do we partner with our doctors? So what we're here to do is put the might of our marketing engine and all of our learnings behind your practice to help you drive more patients in and drive more profitable marketing. And we're excited whenever we have new providers who come on, who raise their hands and say, I want to scale the heck out of this. We have a marketing team that's dedicated to our providers to help them figure out how to drive more patients in. So that's a great question, and something that we're super passionate about, is figuring out, how do you really scale and how do you compete?
Oh, absolutely. It's so important. I mean, just working with our clients, it's getting more and more complex, especially when you're competing with these really big brands, because they have marketing teams like you're talking about, and you can't just kind of do it yourself. You can, to a certain extent, if you have a little bit of help, but at some point there's going to be diminishing returns, I think. All right. So what kind of doctor is really right for Candid? As someone who's kind of transitioning, they're adding the Jetta to their portfolio. They don't have liners at all. Is it all of these? Like, what doctor is the best fit for you?
I would say that the top kind of archetypes that make the most sense to think about considering a Candid are really the following. One is somebody who's done some amount of clear aligners in the past. Maybe it represents 20%, but really wants to grow that segment of their practice, and believes that there's true opportunity, and understands that clear aligners do work, and wants to make that happen. I think that's one. I think the second is doctors who really today are 70, 80, 90% clear aligners. They're really all in on making clear aligners work, but they want to be more efficient and they want to be more profitable. I think if you're looking for efficiency and profitability and figuring out how to attack not just the segment at $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000, but how do I actually go out and get the folks who are considering Smile Direct Club? How do I get the folks who maybe are a little bit lower on the price curve but need a great solution? We want to partner with you, where if you're starting 200, 300 cases a year, how do you bring that number to 500? And I think that for us is really the bread and butter market, where we're seeing some providers, doing 20 cases a week because they've figured out how to go out and market and compete in that space. And that's something that we love to partner with.
Oh, those are great case studies. I'm sure a lot of doctors would like to talk to those doctors to see how they're doing. Sure. All right. So what if a doctor's kind of been telling, potential patients or patients, they've been talking negatively about remote treatment, that these D2C model? Like, how do you kind of transition that story when you're talking about Candid now, you have to explain how it's different, but you get the benefits of it without the cons. I mean, what would you say?
Yeah, the benefits of Candid today for a doctor are clear, right? And for the patient, I think are even more clear, which is before with Candid, you wouldn't see a doctor in person. Everything was done through telehealth. So orthos would review every single case and treatment plan every case. That was always something that Candid did from the very beginning. 100% of cases that Candid has ever done had an orthodontist review clinical diagnostic photos, x-rays from our studios, and generating all the treatment plans. So we've always done that. But now you have the luxury and the benefit as a patient of having a provider in person with whom you can connect. And so if there are ever issues, problems, or things come up, you want that in-person hand-holding. And it turns out that 80% of patients, when they visited our website, preferred to actually go in and see a doctor at least once in person, but then wanted the accessibility of minimal office visits. And Candid is now, because we're bringing that into the ortho practice and into the GP dental practice to some extent, we're now saying, look, this opportunity is there for you. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more expensive than it was when it was DTC, because the office has more overhead and the office has assistants and hygienists and other people who are part of the fold. But you're going to get that extra level of oversight where if there's an issue, there's going to be a doctor there who's going to be able to help you and look at it. And I think that message certainly resonates. When we were pro and DTC, that was the message that doctors were delivering to their patients, and it was landing. And I think now more than ever, especially that we're 100% pro, that channel conflict is completely gone.
Interesting. So what, in your opinion, what is the future of clear aligners? What is it looking like? We're going to have recyclable materials. Any big changes you think are going to happen in the industry in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think that the biggest change is that we're going to go from 30% of cases to 50% plus. I think clear aligners will double. I think that this Jetta, Audi, Porsche analogy will play itself out, where I think you'll see limited direct-to-consumer growth in the US at least, and a lot of that growth happening in the chair, but because of access and due to technology. I think you'll probably see some doctors adopting more direct 3D printing and manufacturing of at least the first few trays to get a patient started same day. But yes. I think that you'll also see the growth of new competitors at the upper end of the market, competing with the big guys with new, innovative, exciting technologies on the material science front, which you mentioned. So the plastics themselves, and other devices and tools that both help accelerate treatment and promote healing to create a more predictable life cycle. So I'm very curious to see today with aligners, you want them to work, you really got to wear them 20, 22 hours a day, and you've got to be really consistent with that. And I think potentially one of the big changes you'll see over the next 5 to 10 years is, better technology that partners with the aligner to potentially reduce the amount of time that you would either need to spend in aligners to get the same amount of movement, or maybe, I don't know if we'll get there, but actually reduce the amount of wear time you need to still drive a predictable amount of movement. So we'll see if that happens. I think that's a really big unlock, because the biggest barrier for patients is wearing them, 22 hours a day and having compliance. So whoever, and hopefully it's us, can unlock compliance, I think we'll have a huge market gain.
So is there anything on the horizon for Candid that you want to share?
There's tons coming, but the big news is that we did, make this pivot to be 100% focused on the professional channel, and I'm really excited about that. So it's a massive change. We cut, most of our revenue to do this, and we hope the community embraces us for making this change.
I'm glad we could share your story on this change. I think it really is a big one. Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we wrap up?
That's it. Thank you so much for having me. If you're interested in learning more, you can visit us at candidpro.com or candidco.com. And if you'd like to connect directly, feel free to email me, Nick, N-I-C-K, at candidco.com, and I will connect you with somebody on our team to speak directly. Thank you so much.
Perfect. All right, Nick, thanks. It's great talking to you.
Thanks, Richie.
CEOs like Nick have a ton of data at their disposal, and his messaging kept going back to affordability and accessibility. Candid can help you achieve those things with your practice. Even if you're not using Candid, really think about how affordable and accessible are my solutions to my patients' problems. If you have an idea for an episode or you want to be a guest, go to orthothrive.com. You can reach me directly at richard@orthosalesengine.com. Keep grinding, keep thriving, and I'll see you next time.